Welcome to the Semper AI Digest. I'm Tomas, your AI research lead, always scanning the horizon for what's next.
And I'm Aiva. Together, we keep you sharp, informed, and ahead of the curve.
Let's get into it. All right, so Anthropic just blinked. They had to. Welcome to Semper AI Digest. I'm Tomas.
And I'm Aiva. And yeah, we are absolutely leading with this because what happened over the weekend was basically a complete reversal of Anthropic's Fable 5 strategy.
They announced they're extending Fable 5 access on all paid subscription plans through July 19th. And not just that, Claude Code's weekly rate limits are staying 50% higher too. This is huge.
Okay, so for anyone who missed the initial rollout drama, catch us up on what exactly changed here.
Right, so when Fable 5 launched, it was available on subscriptions, but with pretty tight usage limits. You could use up to half your weekly limit on Fable 5, then you'd either burn through usage credits or switch to another model. And the API pricing was, it was astronomical. We're talking costs that made GPT 5.6 Sol Ultra look cheap by comparison.
Which is wild because Sol Ultra is not cheap.
Not even a little bit. But here's the thing. There was this real sense in the community that Anthropic had kind of painted themselves into a corner. They had this incredible model, right? By most accounts, Fable 5 is legitimately the most capable reasoning model publicly available right now. But the pricing was so prohibitive that most people were going to stay stuck on Opus 4.8.
And meanwhile, OpenAI has GPT 5.6 Sol Ultra readily available.
Exactly. So you've got this situation where the gap between what OpenAI is offering and what Anthropic's practical option is, not their best model, but what people can actually afford to use regularly, that gap was the widest it's ever been between these two companies.
Okay, I'm trying to think about this from Anthropic's perspective, though. Like, these models are insanely expensive to run, right? The compute costs for something like Fable 5 must be through the roof. If they're just hemorrhaging money on subscription access...
Oh, they definitely are, no question. But here's where it gets really interesting strategically. There's been a lot of discussion, and I think there's some real substance to this, that Anthropic is basically holding Opus 5 in reserve.
Wait, holding it in reserve? Like it's ready to go?
Well, ready or close to ready. The theory is that Opus 5 is their answer to this exact problem. Fable 5 is the flagship, the absolute bleeding edge, but it's not sustainable as a mass-market product at current compute costs. Opus 5 would be the more efficient version, still incredibly capable, probably better than Opus 4.8 by a significant margin, but actually viable to run at scale.
So they're using Fable 5 as almost like a technology demonstration? Like, here's what we can do, here's the ceiling, and then Opus 5 becomes the practical implementation?
Exactly. And the timing of this extension is really telling. They're keeping Fable 5 on subscriptions through July 19th. That's not a random date. That gives them breathing room to either get Opus 5 ready or to figure out how to make Fable 5 more cost-effective to serve.
Or both, potentially. But okay, I want to push on something here. We're talking about this like it's all strategic chess moves, but there's also just the reality that they launched with a pricing and access model that didn't work. Like, is this them being strategic, or is this them doing damage control?
Oh, it's absolutely damage control. Strategic damage control. But yeah, the initial rollout was not landing well. People were hitting their limits in hours, not days or weeks. There are reports of users spending hundreds of dollars in credits in a single afternoon.
Which is insane for most use cases.
Completely unsustainable. So Anthropic had this choice. Do they stick to their guns on the restrictive access model and watch people migrate to GPT 5.6 Sol, or do they eat the compute costs for a few more weeks and keep users in their ecosystem?
And they chose keep users in the ecosystem.
They had to, because once people move their workflows, once they adapt their prompts and their tools and their habits to a different model, that's really hard to win back. Even if you come back later with better pricing or a better model, you've lost momentum.
Right, and we've seen that play out before with model switches. There's actual friction to changing what model you're working with day to day. Okay, so what does this mean for someone who's on a Claude subscription right now? What's the actual user experience change?
So right now, through July 19th, you have more generous access to Fable 5 than you did in the initial rollout. The exact limits haven't been publicly detailed in terms of raw numbers, but the effective experience is that you can use Fable 5 more extensively before hitting usage caps. And Claude Code specifically, which is their coding-focused interface, has 50% higher rate limits, which is significant if you're doing development work.
That's actually meaningful for developers. If you're iterating on code, you're making a lot of requests. Having higher rate limits there makes the experience way less frustrating.
Absolutely. And here's something I find really interesting about this whole situation. It's forcing us to rethink what the tiers even mean anymore. There's been this long-standing hierarchy of Haiku, Sonnet, Opus, and those made sense as small, medium, large. Fast and cheap, balanced, powerful, and expensive.
Right, the classic tier structure.
But now we have Fable and we have Mythos, which, fun fact, are apparently the same model weights, just Fable has safety guardrails and Mythos doesn't. And these are sitting above Opus in the hierarchy. So it's more like Haiku, Sonnet, Opus, and then this whole other category of reasoning-focused models.
Okay, wait, so Fable and Mythos are the same underlying model, just different safety implementations?
According to what's been discussed in the developer community, yeah, same weights, different guardrails, which makes sense if you think about it. Mythos is the research-focused version, where they want to see what the model can do without constraints. Fable is the production version, where they need it to be safe for general deployment.
That's actually a really elegant way to do it from a development standpoint. You're not training two separate models, you're just training one incredibly capable model and then deciding how much to constrain it for different use cases.
Exactly. But it does complicate the product line. Like, where does Opus 5 fit when it launches? Is it better than Sonnet 4.6 but worse than Fable 5? Is it comparable to Fable 5 but more efficient? There's been some speculation that Opus 5 should really be thought of as like 5.1 in terms of positioning.
Meaning it's not a full generation leap, it's more of an incremental improvement?
Well, or maybe that it's part of the same generation as Fable 5, just optimized differently. Like Fable 5 is the maximum capability version, and Opus 5 is the same generation of technology, but tuned for efficiency and practical deployment. We've actually seen this pattern before. There have been moments where Sonnet was briefly better than the current Opus because of training improvements across the board.
Right, it's not always a clean hierarchy where the bigger model is always better at everything. Sometimes the newer, smaller model leapfrogs the older, larger one.
Exactly. Sonnet 3.5 was better than Opus 3. Sonnet 4.5 was better than Opus 4.1. Sonnet 4.6 was reportedly slightly better than Opus 4.5 on some benchmarks. So there's precedent for the tiers kind of shuffling around.
Okay, so big picture. What are you expecting to happen on July 20th? Like the day after this extension ends?
Okay, so I have a prediction, and I'm pretty confident in this. I think the moment Fable 5 comes off subscription access, or the moment they restrict it significantly, that's when Opus 5 drops.
As the replacement that people can actually afford to use regularly.
Exactly. Opus 5 becomes the affordable frontier model. It's not quite as powerful as Fable 5, but it's close enough that for most use cases, the difference doesn't matter. And it's priced in a way that Anthropic can actually sustain offering it broadly.
That would make sense. It's basically a controlled step down. Let people experience the absolute best with Fable 5, get them hooked on the capabilities, and then when you pull it back, you're replacing it with something that's still really good, just not quite as mind-blowing, rather than just dropping them back to Opus 4.8, which would feel like a huge regression.
Right, and it keeps them competitive with OpenAI. Because right now, if your choice is Opus 4.8 or GPT 5.6 Sol, that's not really a choice. But if it's Opus 5 or GPT 5.6 Sol, now we're talking about a real comparison. Different strengths, different characteristics, but both are frontier models.
And by then, they'll have a few more weeks of data on how people are actually using Fable 5, which has to be valuable for tuning Opus 5.
Oh, absolutely. Every prompt, every use case, every workflow people are building with Fable 5 right now is signal for how to optimize the next model in the line. What contexts matter, what reasoning chains are most common, where people hit limitations.
Okay, I'm buying this theory. I think you're probably right about the Opus 5 timing. But I want to talk about the user experience side of this, because there's been some real confusion and frustration around usage tracking.
Oh man, yes. Okay, so this dovetails into some of the OpenAI stuff we need to talk about too, but basically, there have been a lot of people hitting their usage limits way faster than they expected.
And not understanding why.
Right, and it turns out there were some compounding issues. Some of this was on the OpenAI side with Codex, which we'll get to, but there's also just the fundamental reality that these reasoning models use tokens differently than traditional language models.
Because they're doing all this chain of thought reasoning in the background.
Exactly. So what looks like a simple query on the user end might actually be spinning up this extensive internal reasoning process that's burning through a lot of tokens. And users aren't seeing that. They're just seeing their usage disappear and not understanding why.
That's a UI UX problem as much as it's a technical one. If people can't see what's consuming their usage, they can't make informed decisions about how to use the model.
Completely agree. And I think we're going to see the providers get better at surfacing that information, like showing you, hey, this query used X tokens for your prompt and Y tokens for reasoning, so you can start to develop intuition for what's expensive and what's not.
That would help a lot. All right, so before we move on, bottom line for someone listening who's trying to figure out what to do with their Claude subscription right now.
Use Fable 5 while you've got access to it, like legitimately. If you have difficult reasoning problems, if you have complex analysis to do, if you have challenging coding problems, now through July 19th is your window. Don't save your usage because it resets weekly anyway. Experiment with it, push it hard, see what it can do. Because after July 19th, who knows what the access model looks like.
And if you're bumping up against usage limits?
Then you have to make a decision about whether burning credits is worth it for your use case. For some people, for some projects, it absolutely will be, but that's going to be individual to your situation and your budget.
Fair. Okay, so speaking of usage confusion, let's talk about what's been happening with OpenAI's Codex, because this is where things got really messy.
Oh, this is a perfect storm of issues that all stack together in the worst possible way.
Give us the rundown.
Okay, so there were basically 3 separate issues that all combined to make people's usage just evaporate. Issue 1, GPT 5.6 Sol costs twice as much per token after you hit 272,000 tokens in a conversation. That's the tier threshold where the pricing doubles.
Okay, that's a lot of tokens, but not crazy for a long coding session.
Right, and here's where it gets problematic. When OpenAI updated Codex for GPT 5.6 Sol, they increased the context limit from 272,000 to 372,000, which sounds great. More context is better, right? Except that means long conversations were now regularly crossing into that 2x pricing tier, when previously the limit would have kept you from even getting there.
Oh no, so they gave people more rope to hang themselves with, billing-wise.
Exactly. Issue 2, when you use Sol Ultra in Codex, it was spawning what they call Ultra subagents, basically spawning additional reasoning processes, and those subagents were also spawning with Ultra-level compute. So you get this nested recursive situation where you're burning through usage at multiple levels.
That seems like it would compound really fast.
Incredibly fast, and apparently this was intended behavior, which is kind of wild, but they're looking at toning it down in the system prompt. But issue 3 is the real kicker. Sol and Terra used this new V2 subagent layer in Codex that's still early and was disabled by default for other models. The older V1 system would spawn subagents with a fresh conversation history, just the relevant context. V2 copies the entire long context every time.
Oh no.
So now you have extensive reasoning tokens filling up your context window, pushing you into 2x billing territory, and then subagents being spawned that each copy that entire bloated context. And those subagents are also ultra tier, so they're expensive, and they're all spawning more reasoning tokens.
It's exponential.
People were reporting spending $500 in credits in 4 hours. That's not a typo. 4 hours.
Okay, that's not sustainable for anyone except maybe enterprises with huge budgets. What did OpenAI do about it?
So they've made several fixes. First, they landed some inference optimizations, and they're passing the savings on to users, about 10% more usage across the board for GPT 5.6 Sol. Second, they reverted the context limit back to 272,000 to stop people from accidentally bleeding into that 2x pricing tier. They're planning to roll 372,000 back out eventually, but they want to do it in a way that doesn't cause unexpected usage spikes.
Probably with better guardrails or warnings.
Right. And third, they reverted some experiments they were running with reasoning effort levels, what they apparently call juice values internally, which is kind of a great term. Those experiments were causing usage to spike, so they pulled them back.
Okay, so if you're a Codex or ChatGPT work user, your usage should be draining significantly slower now.
That's what they're saying. And honestly, this is a good example of the growing pains of these reasoning models. The providers are still figuring out how to offer these capabilities in a way that's both powerful and predictable for users.
And that doesn't bankrupt users accidentally.
Yeah, that's kind of important. But on the positive side, OpenAI did announce that these are improvements, not nerfs. They're not reducing capability, they're optimizing efficiency and passing savings along. And they specifically mentioned that there's slightly more usage of something called multi-age, but the message cut off, so we don't have the full context on what that means.
Probably multi-agent, right? That would make sense with the subagent discussion.
Almost certainly, yeah. Okay, so let me hit you with something that actually made me stop and go, wait, what? Sam Altman tweeted that GPT 5.6 Sol Ultra produced a proof of a 50-year-old math conjecture.
Okay, I saw that too, and my immediate reaction is, which conjecture and has it been verified?
So he didn't name the specific conjecture, but he emphasized that unlike the Erdos unit distance problem, which was an earlier math result, this was done with a model that's publicly available today, like right now. You can go use the model that did this.
That's actually significant, because the Erdos result was with an internal model that wasn't released, right?
Right. And there was some controversy about verification and whether the proof actually held up. So I think Altman is trying to get ahead of that by emphasizing that this is reproducible. In theory, other mathematicians can work with the same model and verify the result.
Okay, but has anyone actually verified it yet? Because a model producing a proof and a proof being correct are two different things.
That's fair, and that's an important distinction. The announcement is fresh, so I think the verification process is ongoing. But the fact that he's calling it out specifically and saying he looks forward to seeing what scientists and researchers can do with the model, that suggests he's pretty confident in the result.
I'm cautiously optimistic. If this holds up, this is genuinely significant. A 50-year-old conjecture is not trivial. That's something that human mathematicians have been working on for decades.
And think about what it means that a model people can access right now did this. Not a future model, not a lab-only model. GPT 5.6 Sol Ultra, which yes is expensive, but is available. That's a pretty big deal for the research community.
It is, assuming the proof is valid. I think we both want to see the verification process play out. But yeah, if this is real, it's a landmark moment.
Agreed. And it raises interesting questions about how mathematical research might change as these models get more capable. Like, do mathematicians start using them as proof assistants, as tools to explore conjectures and generate candidate proofs that humans then verify?
We're probably already seeing some of that, but it'll accelerate. Though I imagine there will be a lot of debate in the mathematical community about what it means for a proof to be discovered by an AI versus by a human.
Oh, absolutely. There's going to be philosophical debates about understanding and insight versus brute force search through proof space. But practically, if the model can produce valid proofs of unsolved problems, that's useful regardless of the philosophical questions.
Fair point. All right, let's talk about some of these tiering and model hierarchy discussions, because there's been a lot of confusion about what model to use when.
Yeah, so there's this really interesting thread from someone in the community breaking down how to think about Claude's tiers now. And the key insight is that Opus 5, when it launches, should probably be thought of as 5.1 rather than as a separate tier.
Meaning it's part of the same generation as Fable 5?
Exactly. If it's better than Fable 5, you'd expect them to label it differently, like 5.1 or maybe 6.0. But the expectation is that it's the same generation of technology, just tuned differently. And we've seen this before. There have been brief windows where Sonnet was better than Opus because of training improvements.
Right, we talked about that earlier. The tiers aren't always strict hierarchies.
Right. So the current thinking is that the real tier structure is Haiku, then Sonnet, then Opus, then this new category of Fable and Mythos at the top. And Fable and Mythos are the same tier, same weights. Mythos just has the safeguards removed.
For research, presumably.
Right. So when you're choosing a model, you're not just thinking about capability anymore. You're thinking about what kind of task you're doing. Do you need fast iteration? Use Haiku. Need balanced performance? Sonnet. Need deep reasoning? Fable or Opus, depending on your budget.
And if you're doing research that requires unfiltered outputs, Mythos, though that's not generally available.
Right. Okay, let's pivot to some quick hits because there's some other stuff worth touching on. Grok 4.5 apparently has some impressive document analysis capabilities. The announcement mentioned in-depth analysis and frontier reasoning on challenging document analysis tasks.
Do we have benchmarks on that, or is that just the marketing claim?
It's based on the official announcement from Grok's account, so it's their characterization of the capability. It would be interesting to see independent testing of document analysis tasks across Grok 4.5, Claude, and GPT models.
Yeah, document analysis is one of those things that's really important for enterprise use cases, but doesn't get as much hype as coding or math.
Absolutely. If Grok 4.5 is legitimately strong there, that's a real differentiator, especially for legal, financial, or research applications where you're dealing with complex documents.
I'd want to see it tested on things like dense academic papers, legal contracts, financial reports, stuff with complicated structure and domain-specific language.
For sure. Okay, and then there's been continued discussion about Fable 5's economic sustainability. One observer noted that when their usage limit ran out, they burned through $500 in credits in 4 hours and called the pricing illogical for average users.
I mean, they're not wrong. That's not a sustainable price point for regular use.
No, and I think everyone, including Anthropic, knows that. The question is whether Fable 5 is meant to be a regular use model, or if it's more of a special purpose tool when you really need maximum capability.
Right, like you use Sonnet or Opus for 95% of your work, and you pull out Fable 5 for the really hard problems.
Exactly. But even then, the economics are tough. If you're burning $500 in 4 hours, that's $125 an hour, which is getting into specialized consultant hourly rates. You'd really need to be getting significant value out of it to justify that cost.
Though I guess if it's solving problems that would otherwise take days or weeks of human time, the math could work out.
True. It's all about the alternative cost. If Fable 5 can do an hour what would take a team of experts a week, then $125 an hour is a bargain. But that's a pretty high bar to clear consistently.
And most people's use cases probably aren't that high stakes.
Right. So I think we're going to see the market segment into different tiers. Enterprises and researchers with specific high-value problems will use Fable 5 and similar ultra-capable models when they need them. Regular users will stick with Sonnet, Opus, standard GPT models, and there'll probably be a middle tier of power users who selectively use the ultra models for specific tasks.
That makes sense as a market structure. It's kind of like cloud computing. You have your regular instances for everyday workloads, and then you have these specialized high-performance instances that cost way more, but you only spend them up when you really need them.
That's a great analogy. And the providers will probably start building more sophisticated tools for managing that, like automatic routing, where you submit a task and it gets sent to the right tier model based on difficulty.
OpenAI's been experimenting with that kind of thing, right? Where the system decides whether to use standard or extended reasoning.
Yeah, and I think we'll see more of that. Okay, so let me try to tie some of this together, because there's a broader narrative here about where the AI model market is heading.
Please do, because we've covered a lot of ground.
So I think we're watching a shift from a simple small, medium, large model hierarchy to something more like a capability matrix. You've got size as one dimension, but you've also got specialization, coding-focused, reasoning-focused, general purpose. And you've got different price performance tiers.
And companies are trying to cover more of that matrix.
Exactly. Anthropic has Haiku through Opus for the traditional tiers, plus Fable and Mythos for extreme reasoning. OpenAI has standard GPT models, plus Soul for reasoning, plus specialized models for coding and other domains. Google has Gemini in different sizes, plus specialized versions.
And they're all competing on different dimensions. It's not just who has the best model, it's who has the right model for this specific use case.
Right, and that makes it more complicated for users, but also potentially more useful because you can pick the right tool for the job instead of just always using the biggest model.
Though it also requires more sophistication to use effectively. You need to understand the differences between models and when to use which one.
True, which is why I think the automatic routing stuff is going to become really important. Most users don't want to think about which model to use. They just want their problem solved efficiently.
Okay, so looking at the next couple weeks, what are you watching for?
Obviously, I'm watching July 19th to see what happens with Fable 5 access. Does it get extended again? Does Opus 5 drop? Do they announce some new pricing model? That's the big date on the calendar. I'm also watching for verification of that math conjecture proof. That could be a really big deal if it holds up.
I'm watching to see if the usage issues with codecs are actually resolved, or if there are more problems lurking. And more broadly, I'm watching to see how enterprises respond to these ultra-capable but expensive models. Are they finding use cases where the economics work? Or is this still too early and too expensive for widespread adoption?
Good question. I think we'll start seeing more case studies over the next few months of organizations that are successfully using these models for specific high-value tasks.
And hopefully more transparency about costs and ROI, because right now there's a lot of experimentation, but not a lot of public data about what actually pencils out economically.
Agreed. All right, I think that's a good place to wrap. This has been a really eventful few days in AI land.
It really has. And it feels like we're at this inflection point where the models are capable enough to do genuinely impressive things, but the infrastructure and economics are still being figured out.
Which is an exciting place to be, honestly. We get to watch this all take shape in real time. If you're enjoying these conversations, please subscribe to Semper AI Digest wherever you're listening. Share it with friends who are trying to keep up with what's happening in AI. This stuff moves fast, and we're here to help you make sense of it.
And if you've got thoughts on any of this, especially if you're using Fable 5 or you've been hit by the codex usage issues, we'd love to hear from you. The community conversation around these tools is just as important as the announcements themselves.
Absolutely. All right, we'll catch you next time on Semper AI Digest.
See you then.